Hey y'all. Today I'm going to be discussing the case of Tinker v. Des Moines, which was decided in 1968 and pertains to the right of students to protest and express their First Amendment rights. So my main argument for this case is that it was pretty limited the way it actually expanded students' rights, and further that it gained much of the press coverage it did because of its association with the Vietnam War and the protest movement that was going on at the time. Further, when we look at cases today, such as Morse v. Frederick, it becomes apparent that the rights with which public school students are endowed is still pretty narrow, and that many media outlets and the public still don't really take the rights of students very seriously. Now, this shouldn't really be surprising because throughout much of American history, the idea of children or students having the same rights or First Amendment rights as adults was considered ludicrous within the public and legal sphere, especially so within the school sphere, I should say. And it wasn't until 1943 that, with the case of Barnett, that students were even acknowledged as having First Amendment rights. Um, Either way, Tinker took place within the context of the 60s and the demonstrations that were going on. A few students in Des Moines, Iowa decided to protest the war in 1965. They did so by wearing black armbands as a sign of protest. Two of these students were Mary and John Tinker. Many of these students were high schoolers and a few were middle schoolers. Seven were suspended in total, and they took the school district to court. The school argued that students caused a disruption, and thus they had the right to discipline these students in any way they saw fit, because they caused a commotion. After a long appeals process, the Supreme Court disagreed, saying that students do have a right to protest and express their opinion so long as it does not cause substantial disruption. Famously, Justice Abe Fortas said that students do not shed their rights at the schoolhouse gates. However, the lengths which the students can express themselves or could is still pretty limited, and they cannot do things such as like openly criticize the school administration, and they can still face discipline for that, for instance. And there are many ways which tools schools still can regulate students. And the main victory here was a narrow one because it does allow students the right to protest, but so long as they do not cause a substantial disruption. Many media outlets would highlight this and almost emphasize it as a way of reassurance, because this didn't mean that students could protest and cause like mass demonstrations like were raging throughout the country. And further, a lot of these news articles didn't really give credence to the importance of students' rights. None of these articles I examined had this in headlines, and many also emphasized that like students couldn't wear like mini skirts, for instance. So it is limited in its application. Further, this trend would continue with cases throughout the 80s, and in Morse v. Frederick in 2007, a student raised a banner. Oh, also this is Mary Tinker in court and today. Anyways, a student would raise a massive banner that said "Bong hits for Jesus." This case garnered a lot of attention and was mostly noted for its satirical nature and whatnot. But the student in this case was actually trying to test his First Amendment rights, and most newspapers did not really acknowledge this. The case further curtailed student rights when the Supreme Court decided that there could be a pro-drug free speech exception for students. And with some justices, such as Clarence Thomas, believing that students still should have no rights and that Tinker should be overturned. This shows that the battle for students' rights is very much still ongoing, and that to this day, many media outlets and even many legal theorists don't really give students the same credence and the same attention as like a full-fledged citizen and adult would get with these cases. And it's for that reason that Tinker remains relevant, and that it is still within the public sphere of debate.